How's everybody doing tonight? As most of you know, I've been smoking meat for a few years now, and I thought it'd be kind of a neat idea that with this next project I'm going to be doing for my church, that I would put my process on videos so that if any of you are wanting to learn how to do this, that you can kind of watch me and kind of watch what I do. And this weekend what I'm going to be doing is smoking beef brisket and pork loin. I'm going to be doing it for quite a few folks, so I've got about 25 pounds worth of beef brisket I'm going to be doing, 20 pounds of pork loin. I'm not going to take you through the setup process of the entire batch, but I will show you, bits and pieces of it, and that way you can put it together. So I've got the beef brisket right here. It's a real good one I got at Sam's. This is the full size 14-pound brisket, and then I've got a couple other 7.5-pound flats that I'll also be doing, but for the sake of this recording, I'll just concentrate on this full pork loin. So obviously the first thing we're going to want to do is take it out of the package and rinse it off, and then we're going to start trimming it up. Back to you in a second. Okay, I'm back here. I've got it out of the package. I've rinsed it all off. As you can see, this here's the fat side. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start trimming it. And then I'm also going to cut this. I'm going to cut the flat away from the point. That way I'm going to lower my overall weight, which will again lower my cook time. If I try to cook this entire piece the way it is at a hour and a quarter per pound, with a 14-pound piece, I'm looking at a good 16-17 hour smoke, and I just don't have that kind of time. So I will be cutting it into a little bit more manageable size for both time and my smoker. So what I like to do, and everybody kind of has their own way of doing these things. There's a lot of guys out there that have a lot more experience than I do. I just kind of do what works with me. For those just learning, if you want to do what I do, great. For those of you that have been around a lot longer and know a lot more than I do, if you are watching this and you want to give me some pointers, I'm all for that. But just kind of, a somewhat beginner showing other beginners is what I'm doing here. So basically the first thing I want to do is kind of trim off some of the fat. This big large hunk piece is going to be the first piece I'm going to take off. You want to make sure you have a real good sharp knife. If you don't have a sharp knife, it's actually going to make your cutting worse, and that will actually be more dangerous of getting yourself cut. So I do like to have a very sharp knife to do this. So you just want to cut this away. Sometimes it's easier than others. The last one I didn't. And also you want to cut away these straggling pieces that don't really do much for you. There's still some there, so I'm going to cut down here and try to get all of this off. The fat here, I don't want. The fat on the other side, the fat cap, that I do want. I will do a little bit of trimming on that just so it's not so thick in spots, a little more even. But this stuff we need to get rid of. Kind of trim up any fat here. There's also a big hunk of fat on this side. Every piece of meat can be a little different, so you just kind of have to poke and prod it and see what you have. Obviously, this big hunk of fat here I'm going to take off. There is a little bit of meat attached to this, so we'll just... So let me work on trimming this, and I'll be right back with you. Alright, well, I'm just about done trimming this piece up. I'm not going to open up the other pieces yet. I'll do kind of similar to what I'm doing here. As you can see, I kind of cut this in half. I got the main flat right here, the point over here. I'm trying to keep it more weight-wise equal than anything else. If I was doing competition, I'd be prepping this thing a lot differently than what I am right now, because when you're doing competition, your main focus is how's this meat going to look at the end when you slice it up, put it in a box to be judged. I'm not doing a competition this weekend, so I could be a little more liberal with what I'm doing. I don't have to be as careful. If you're wanting to get into competition, you want to do more research and be a lot more careful with, with what you're doing. But we're not doing competition. This is just for a church event. So I've got it pretty much trimmed down the way I want. Most of the fat. The fat cap here is not too bad. And what we want to keep that on, because when you go to smoke that fat's going to render down and those juices are going to get in the meat and it's going to help your overall moisture level. So you want to keep that on. You don't want to trim that off. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a quick rinse of this, and I'm going to get it into my bin here and start applying rub. I do a couple layers of rub, and you'll see in a minute how and why I do that. Hold on just a second. Alright, now what we're going to do is, a lot of people do this differently. A lot of people wait until they get ready to put on the smoker to put the rub on, and then they do their injection the night before. But I read an article that kind of made sense to me about doing injection the night before, and that's the way I used to always do it. But the article that I read stated, standard practice is putting the injection in the night before, put it in the fridge. The problem that you run into that is, that meat's getting cold and it condenses up, tightens up, and it ends up pushing all that injection out. And I was reading that article, I'm like, it makes a lot of sense to me, because every morning when I gone to check my meat, it's juices, everywhere but in meat. So I'm going to do a little differently this time. I'm going to put my rub on tonight, let it sweat overnight. Then tomorrow, right before I put on the smoker, that's when I'm going to inject it. But right now we're going to go ahead and put some rub on. I like to do a couple layers. I'm going to do a light layer of just some seasoned salt, just a real light layer. Alright, so just a real light layer there, and then the rub I'm going to be using, I found this online, and since my nickname's Bull, I thought it was appropriate. It's called Big Bull's Texas Brisket, so I'm going to give this a shot on this brisket and see how it turns out. I tried it before on a hamburger, and it was awesome, so I can't imagine it'll be bad with a brisket either, so we'll put that on. This here you can be a little more liberal on. I will be, after I inject it tomorrow, I will be putting more rub on it. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to flip it. Get the other side with the seasoned salt. Like I said, just a kind of a light layer. I read somewhere, I don't remember where, that the salt causes a chemical reaction, kind of helps that meat sweat, which will help drive that seasoning down into the meat. And then our rub here. Now, being from Texas, I was expecting this rub to be a lot spicier, but when I tried it on the hamburger, spice-wise, it wasn't too bad. There was a little bit of spice in there, don't get me wrong, but not so much where it burns your mouth off. Now I'm going to look at these edges here. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap this thing tight with 2 layers of aluminum foil. And then we'll pop that in the fridge overnight. Okay, that's one down. And one thing I'm going to do too is I'm going to weigh it now that I've cut it. Got a little scale here. I know how much I weigh. So we're going to figure out how much this cut is. Alright, so that right there is an 8-pound piece. And I will do the rest of the brisket the same way. When I'm done with this, I'll bring the pork loin out and I'll show you what I do with that. See you in a minute. Alright everybody, I'm back. I've got the beef brisket. It's all been rubbed, it's all been wrapped in foil. It's now in the fridge where it's going to stay the rest of the night until tomorrow when I put it on the smoker. Right now, we're going to get started on the pork loin. As you can see, I've already got it out of the package, so I've already rinsed it up, kind of saved you that. There's not really a whole lot to that. As you can see, these are pretty ginormous pieces of meat. These are 10 pounds each that I'm doing, but again, now these, time-wise, I probably had time to do them, but just out of convenience sake, what I'm going to do with these is I am going to cut them in half and make them basically 5-pound loaves, which will definitely take a lot, shorter time to cook. With pork, generally, it's about 40 minutes per hour. What I like to do is I try to get, when I'm smoking it, I smoke it to the point of getting it up to about 140 internal temperature. Then that's when I wrap it and then let it finish off wrapped in foil until it gets up to the temperature of 160, 165 is where I like to have it. So that way you give it the resting time and it doesn't dry out on you. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just cut these in half real quick, and then there's not really a whole lot to trim in these. You just kind of want to go around to some of the loose pieces, kind of little extra pieces of fat like that, trim that off. You do want to keep a little bit of the cap on there because, again, while it's cooking like the brisket, it's going to render down the meat and add flavor to your meat. It's going to add moisture to your meat, so you don't want to get rid of this. I know a lot of people say, oh, look at all the fat. No, you want to keep this fat. So let me cut these in half, get them trimmed up, and then we'll get to applying the rub, because I do a kind of a 3-stage layering on that. So I'll be with you in just a second after I trim this. Alright, so I got things trimmed up. I really didn't do much of these. You didn't miss much. I just kind of took some of the loose pieces, like this little loose piece here. I'll try to go ahead and trim off. I cut them in half, as you can see, to equal lengths. Again, like I said, a lot of this cap you want to keep on. I trim off the loose pieces, kind of even them up. So basically what I have here now is 4 or 5-pound loaves. Or at least that's like I call them loaves, because they kind of look like loaves of bread when they're in the smoker, to tell you the truth. So anyway, what I do is as I mentioned before, I do 3 different levels of rub on these. 2 light layers and a medium layer. I've had a lot of success with this combination. It has a lot of, different dynamics of flavor to it. I use a Weber's Sweet and Tangy, McCormick's Barbecue, and then for the final rub, the Sweet Rub O' Mine is what I like to use on my pork. I use it on my ribs, use it on my pork. They say use it on all meat, but I pretty much keep it strictly to pork when I use that on. Alright, so let's go ahead and show you how I do one, and then I'll cut the camera off and do the other ones. Alright, so I've got them foil here. Alright, so we'll start with just the general barbecue. And again, I don't have a whole lot here, so just a real light layer. You don't have to put a lot on. Just enough, and where it's going to add that flavor profile in there for you. And then same thing with the sweet and tangy. You don't have to put a whole lot on there. It's kind of and then you come back in with the Sweet Rub O' Mine to cap off. One thing I didn't mention when I was putting the rub on the brisket too is you want to kind of go along and kind of pat it down. And as you can see, this has got a beautiful color to it already. Can't wait to see what it looks like tomorrow out on the smoker. And that's another challenge going to be tomorrow. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. It's really cold outside, so I'm going to have a challenge keeping those smokers up to temp. Alright, so we got all the rub on there. And then we're just going to wrap this in foil just like we did the brisket. You do want it, and you want to make sure to rub it, or make sure it's real tight. And then I will be doing a second layer of foil on it. Just kind of like in the opposite direction. Again, it should be about 5 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and weigh just to see if I'm pretty close on my cut. Eh, 4 pounds, pretty close, 4.5. I'll write it on here so I know what the weight is on that one. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other 3. And put everything to bed for the night, and then I'll be back with you tomorrow when I get ready to start the smokers up and get these things on. I appreciate your time and hope you learned something. Again, if you're an old pro at this and if you want to give me some pointers, that'd be awesome. Have a good night.